Bienvenidas, bienvenidos a una nueva charla COVID. De nuevo hoy tenemos a unos invitados de lujo para poder conversar sobre el sistema educativo de los países nórdicos y la idea es ver con ellos pues, bueno, cómo está siendo la vuelta a la escuela, cómo está siendo el desconfinamiento o cómo ha sido el desconfinamiento en términos educativos, sociales y también de conciliación familiar, que es un tema que nos interesa muchísimo estos días. Así que vamos a hacer la charla en inglés para podernos comunicar con los invitados. And welcome Ola Erstad from the University of Oslo and Christina Kumpulainen from the University of Helsinki, but actually speaking from Vancouver, from Canada. We would like to start by asking you, as always, how are you? This is a very pleasure to have you here, and we would like to start just asking, how are you doing? How are these 2-3 months now of lockdown? If you have been locked down, how has it been? How did you experience these 3 last months?
Christina,
yeah.
Okay. Thank you again for this invitation to join this panel. It is such a wonderful thing to share our experiences because we are living very unusual and unexpected times. I have had the pleasure to follow both the situation at Helsinki and in Finland through my communication with my colleagues and also following our son's schooling that he has been able to do while he has been here in Vancouver, also following the Finnish system, but also some experiences from British Columbia, how people are combating and being resilient in these unusual times, how digital technologies are now being harnessed in more active ways, and people are coping and delivering education through virtual means. So it has been very interesting experience, I think, for all of us, and happy to discuss about these experiences and knowledge what we currently have, how our lives have been affected and how children's and teachers' lives have been affected by COVID-19 and all the restrictions that have come together with this situation. Thank you again.
Yeah, and thank you from me also, all of you, for this invitation and the possibility to discuss some really important issues around the situation we experienced, as Christina was mentioning. So for me, I've been working at home until recently. Norwegian society is opening up for the last 3 weeks about. So I'm back in my office as usual for the last 3 weeks. So personally, I've been stuck at home. My daughter came from Bergen, another city in Norway, over, and so we've been living together, locked down for some months, which is of course very strange, but I'm also head of my department or the Department of Education, which means that I had to organize the whole department changing within a couple of days, from 12th of March to everything becoming digital. So all teaching, all supervision, all the infrastructure and everything had to be dealt with through virtual means. But it went very well, most of it. It's been going well with the technology. People have adjusted. Not all are super competent, but so it's been going well. And the students, of course, they lose some things, but they gain some other things also from doing things online. But more and more, we become more concerned with what you lose, sort of the social dimensions of learning, so which you falls out. But we can talk more about these things.
Good, Ola and Christina, thank you very much. I would like to tell you immediately that our field, because I am absolutely sure that you have a very interesting thing to share with us. You know that in the global perception, there is a global perception about the Nordic country as a country with a strong educational and political system. So I would like to know if do you know how do you think that the COVID-19 has been managed in Finland and Norway, and especially in relation with the educational institutions such as school, for example, university, and of course with family? I don't know if Christina can start.
Yes, yeah, okay, thank you. This is a very, very important question. In Finland, a decision was made that the schools were closed totally and all education was delivered digitally from March 18 to May 14. And this decision became actually pretty quickly, and the ways in which teachers and schools were prepared varied. In Finland, we have been moving towards digitalizing education for quite a while, and we are kind of equipped with different digital infrastructure and learning materials and spaces before COVID-19, but it was now the time to really take all these digital tools and materials into use in a pretty short time span. And but I think overall now we have made some surveys in Finland surveying teachers, children, and parents about the situation. And overall, we feel that we have managed the situation well. There are some concerns about educational equity, and that in some parts the education has not managed to be delivered in such equal ways than in some other areas. But I think due to our investments in digital education before COVID-19 and the restrictions, we were pretty equipped to start to deliver education totally online. But there are consequences and issues that I would like to discuss with you, what kind of challenges and tensions and worries we have experienced during this time. Now schools have closed their doors because in Finland we start summer vacation at the beginning of June, but there were these few weeks before we ended the school and teachers and children were able to connect again, also physically. So happy to discuss these news and findings from surveys and exploratory research studies that now have been conducted in Finland. I did some searching for this interview and we can talk about them more. But I think this kind of being prepared before, not only suddenly building something up for this situation has been pivotal, but still I don't think anybody was able to predict anything like this to happen. So it would be foolish to say that we were totally prepared for the situation. But these infrastructures and materials helped a lot to get the school going and educational processes going during this difficult time.
Good, Ola?
Yeah, the situation in Norway has been more or less the same as in Finland. So the whole education system closed down. So the government decided to close all schools, all universities, university colleges from a certain date. And it happened very fast. So that was the challenge, that they just made a decision and in a couple of days, everything was closed. So it was a huge challenge for teachers, for the school principals, but also for the universities of how to handle these things. So the first step was really to create possibilities for home teaching. So like Christina explained, we also have a digital infrastructure. It varies a bit where you live in the country, which is a high political issue because our whole system is based on equity and equal possibilities. But also the competences of teachers in dealing both with the situation and with the technological resources available. After a while, they decided to open the lower grades of school. So first, early in May, the lower grades opened up. Then the lower secondary levels and upper secondary level opened up. But the universities are still closed for students. So there are no students here at all. So I think, I mean, Pablo mentioned strong Nordic country systems of the Nordic countries. I think this can be discussed a bit, what this is all about. I don't sure if strong is the right word, maybe stable kind of development. So all the Nordic countries have sort of a kind of similar political situation from 1930s after the Second World War, where societies were supposed to be built up and the social democratic political parties were central. So that was very important in national agendas around education. So one part was that it's equal possibilities for all. We have hardly any private schools. Sweden is a bit different there now, but I think Finland and Norway are quite similar, also Denmark. So we have a public school system which is in the focus. We have a high trust in government. So people believe sort of in what the government tells us to do. So we have in Norwegian what we call dugnad, which is sort of a voluntary work, but everybody comes together for a bigger cause. So this was what our government used now, that this is a national dugnad. So everybody has to come together to solve all these challenges. And most of the people are adjusting for that. There are some critical voices, but everybody says this is so important that we stand together and come through this crisis. And the education has been one of the key issues of discussion in this.
So sorry, Ezequiel, only one question about this last subject. It's linked, of course, no? But a few weeks ago in Catalonia, the Minister of Education from Catalonia said that was one of important mistake in this whole weird or extreme period was close the school in the beginning of the pandemic. The reason is because the last research show us that the children are not so strong conduct from the coronavirus to other population. So the Minister of Education say that when the classes return in next September, this September, probably the last decision that the government will take is close the school. I don't know if this discussion is now in Norway and in Finland is similar, or I don't know what is the probably the next step that you will decide there.
Yeah, it's similar in Norway, at least. It's so the National Health Agency raised similar questions, that the government went too fast into a decision of closing all schools, which put a high demand on teachers and parents, especially because they had homework and it was a pressure for homes. And research showed that the younger kids are not so contaminated and it's not at the risk groups as such. But the government says we didn't know that at that time when we made the decision. So if we had opened up, we didn't know what to do. So it was better to close down and then open up. And this was a different strategy than Sweden, for example, which has had quite an open society all the way through and have huge challenges at the moment.
Yes, in Finland, I think many people were a little bit surprised why to open schools for 2 weeks, because our summer holidays were approaching in any case. But I think the decision was, the reason why the schools were opened was that we were also worried of children who perhaps needed special support, and we wanted to have them in the school, and these social and emotional aspects of being in the school and being connected became very, very important, and just touching base with all the children was felt important. Parents could, of course, and guardians decide not to put their child in the school, although we have a kind of a system that expects every child to attend education. We can still, parents and guardians can choose to educate their children in other ways. So that option became possible, obviously, now in these situations. So not all children were forced at a younger age to go to school, but those who wanted could come. And we have been trying to follow all the health regulations for social distancing or physical distancing and so forth in the schools. But we became worried about the fact too that it's so important for children and for families to be connected with each other and in their everyday lives, and also social, psychological, mental health issues are very important. So we may be also doing harm not opening up the school in this respect, not only to think about the virus, but also other consequences, negative consequences may result if we don't connect and kind of have children the opportunity to engage in their schooling if they wanted to do that. So this was an issue, but amazingly well, not that many cases were identified in Finland because of the schools were opened. But of course, we have continued providing distance education, and like in Norway, our higher education system and the education of older students, it is now totally online, and it will continue also in the fall, at least in Finland, for as long as it is needed. So we are still very also conscious of the fact that the next wave may be coming, or the virus may be spreading in the population. But so there are many different voices and many different opinions, and what makes it hard is also that even specialists in health have different opinions, what we should do and how the virus spreads and whether we should wear masks or not, and who. So this is a highly unusual situation, because there seems to be different types of knowledge around, and who knows who is correct and what kind of measures should be taken. This is all just a guess, and like Ola was saying, we need to create collective decisions and try to consider different perspectives and choices and knowledge. And this is a big learning lesson for all of us, I think, and to be prepared next time even better. And I don't think we were prepared at all for this kind of incidents being now around us and what to do. So this is really a test for societies too, to kind of think of its system, and many different foresights activities are done in governments and in education systems, but I don't think anybody was ready, and this kind of foresight was not available. So this is historical moment we are living, and I'm very happy that the Nordic countries have most of it survived pretty well, and we have not lost many people. Of course, it's very sad what has happened in Sweden, but we don't yet know what the decision is right and how everything will evolve in the future. So I'm very careful of now accusing any decision, because people and societies, even in the Nordic countries, are just trying to do what is best and what they think is the best knowledge available. And the next few months or even years will show what kind of decisions were perhaps right and what were wrong.
Great. You know, Christina and Ola, it's a great pleasure just to hear the both experiences in your countries after having, I think that 35 chats in this channel, this program. We are always talking about these ideas about collective strength and community sense, and also the care sense of each other. And just talking to you and seeing some places in the world where the structures, where the public sense is really working, it's a good relief for us. But I would like to ask you, although you have models and structures and educational systems that really works well, which were the challenges that you find as teachers? You are also researchers, of course, but as teachers and also as family members, I don't know, guardians of kids and youth, what did you find there? Which were the big challenges or the big lessons of this pandemic that I agree with you, I think that nobody was prepared in any part of the world to face a situation like this?
I think one big challenge for us, when I speak from my department and discussions we had at the University of Oslo concerning teachers, but also as parents, is partly who's falling out. So it's more difficult to get people in if somebody doesn't show up in a Zoom room set up for a teaching course or something like that. Does anybody know who he or she is, or where they are, or whatever? So there's been a concern of people who are not included or for some reason fall out. And I think for parents also, it's been a challenge for providing over time. At least as Christina also mentioned, there is a concern of children at risk, at family who are at risk for certain kind of reasons. How are we providing for them? So education is a social environment where these things can be discovered and followed up. You have expertise where you can bring in if there is violence at home or other kinds of issues that are brought up. In a virtual situation, this falls out of the focus. So there's been a concern for teachers of what do I do with some of my students I don't see showing up.
Okay. In Finland, what we have now discovered from these surveys is that from the children's perspective, some children have found working from a distance and following all the school work and meeting with their friends very smooth, and actually some have even enjoyed it and felt that they are now learning even more. But there are also some children, and actually quite a few, who really feel that this requires new learning skills from them and more independent skills, self-regulation skills, so that they are all the time on track and kind of controlling their time of the day, how the day evolves, and also parents have found it, and me also personally, how the day is structured when there is no work, no school, how to keep, because it's good for human beings to have some sort of a rhythm in your day. So how to keep that rhythm going, that you have a purposeful and meaningful day throughout, and how to carry on school, how parents can carry on their work, and how to have leisure time, other activities. Also for children, hobbies, sports, other physical activities, or other activities that they are used to engage, arts, meeting with friends, how to continue them, because we have felt that the more stable the rhythm of the day is, it keeps us going, and every day is kind of meaningful. So how to organize? I think this kind of organizing the day has required a lot of co-regulation and self-regulation from the children themselves, and even adult learners and students, like Ola was saying, like when to come to the session and enter the spaces and engage, and having this kind of a rhythm so that you are involved. I'm not now only thinking about academic achievement and like that people need to learn knowledge all the time. I'm also thinking this kind of being connected and being in the rhythm, an important part of well-being and social connecting, and this kind of being in the rhythm and doing all the things that you are supposed to do and you want to do is something that people have found challenging. Also, younger children in Finland have felt that They would have hoped to have more support from the teacher during the online teaching. They have missed the presence and sense of connection with the teacher. We are asking a lot from the teachers in these times, and of course it's natural that that sense of connection to the teacher may have been lost. So this is something we need to work very hard in the future, how this kind of connection and perhaps also this peer connection could be strengthened during these types of situations when we have to work from a distance. So this is something that we have found very important. And of course, there is a lot of more work for teachers, how challenging and stressful it must have been also to organize some physical teaching and distance teaching at the same time. So how to manage all this, we cannot imagine about the workload now teachers have experienced at all levels of education. I know some parents have been now in Finland in media saying that we must raise the salaries of all teachers. I will pay much more now. I want my children back to school as soon as possible. And of course, I think the teaching profession and respect for teachers and educating the next generation is now something that is really at the fore, and people understand how hard work it is, even without COVID. So there are very worrying issues about equity and all children being connected socially and cognitively and emotionally with everybody, but also some lessons to be learned for the future, how we can improve our education and how to balance working life, children's life, their hobbies, their well-being. These issues we can now learn much more from these experiences.
Sorry, Raquel, I want to just make some question about what is saying Christina.
We did only 2 questions of the 10 questions in 40 minutes.
Yeah, this is usually something we always repeat and do. But I think that it's a great challenge, that one, and I want to know some thoughts about how to have a critical point of view about digital technologies. Nowadays, without internet, the last week we were talking with Marina Garcés, that is a philosopher here of Spain, of Barcelona, and she, in a part of our lesson, she tell us that sometimes we just feel that without internet we can't even breathe. So how can we still have a critical point of view about internet, digital technologies, social media? How can we balance this thing that Christina is saying about digital well-being in a quarantine time, you know, where I don't know, internet it's not only for learning, but also to still have social connections and to see our family that is in another country. I don't know. So what do you think about this thing?
No, I mean, one issue is, looking from a Nordic perspective, is access to technology, which I think all our countries in the Nordic region has relatively good access. There is a variation in accessibility depending on where you live. In Norway, we have a long coastline with small communities, which doesn't have the same provision, but still, access is not an issue for us so much anymore, like you can see in many other countries. The main point for us is about what you call digital well-being. So we have, and I think it's a very critical question concerning education and the role of education in our society. So the discussion we're having now on a national level is, what have we learned from what we've been going through for the last couple of months, looking into the future? So are we going back to what we used to know as the normal situation? Or are we about to create a totally new kind of understanding of challenges and possibilities for learning, for schools, for education? And I think that's a very interesting kind of discussion we should have. And the critical dimension in what we deal with in these kind of digital environments is very central. So in Norway, and I know in Finland also, we have a new national curriculum at the moment being implemented, and it starts this August in all schools in whole of Norway. But some of the issues that were planned there 2 or 3 years ago have become really important. So one is about life skills and social skills. So of course you have to know knowledge within subject domains, but there is a transversal kind of competencies that are really emphasized now and concerning how you live your life, how you're prepared to live a life in a digital society. So life skills and social skills have been written in and it's been now highlighted much more than before as very important in what our children need to know. But also the more tradition of media literacy and digital literacy that I've been working on, also where the critical dimension is really important, and this connectedness, but also the massiveness of information and influence that you meet as a young child from a very early age, from the first year of living onwards, is a huge challenge. But I think it's really important then to discuss what kind of education should we have, what kind of learning environments, what kind of self-regulation do we emphasize in the way we want our students or our children to be self-sufficient, managing all the challenges and so forth. So I think that's a critical question. And I think it's interesting when looking ahead. So now we're discussing August, September. Schools will open, but they have to reorganize groups. At the university, we will have hybrid solutions, a few students at the university, others online. So we're discussing really new models of provision of education.
Yes, I think I would like to add what Ola was saying, or emphasize also the fact that I think we need to be very aware and analytic and even critical what kind of content young people are now experiencing and using in home environments, because everybody is busy and perhaps parents are either working or are busy with other things. Children are now much more possibly online at homes. So what is that content they are using? Also, what kind of content are they producing? Are very important issues that we would need to now investigate more and be aware of. There are also very many bad things going on online, and we need to support children to grow into this kind of critical digital citizenship, so that they are aware of false information or other criminal activities that are going on online, and that they are not taken into such activities themselves. So this is something that I am very worried about, because I'm absolutely sure that in most developed countries, and where children have easy access to different types of technologies, there has now been much more time to use and experience various types of contents. So that is what I am personally very worried. So this kind of critical literacy skills that also digital world requires is something that we need to really concentrate even more strongly in formal education, and perhaps there needs to be also education for guardians, supporting them being aware and creating rules and practices, and of course very open environment for discussion and open relationship, close relationship with the children. They are all very important issues that I would like to point out in these times when technologies are being increasingly used for education and for leisure.
Very, very nice to listen to you, because as Ezequiel said before, I think that this is a time where we have a lot of questions, and we have more questions than ever. And I think it's very good to have it, because you start thinking about new issues and about what kind of education system you imagine from this situation. And actually, all these questions we're sharing all the time, you're giving us a lot of answers. So I'm just thinking about writing them up and making a little bit of summarize of everything you're saying. And I will go with a question related with what you said about what we are learning. And also because we have all been working or researching this topic of connected learning, or learning in and out school, connecting what's going on in school and out of school. So I will go and ask, what have you learned about this during this time? Did you reflected something? Did you saw any measures, any proposals, any initiatives to connect schools with the reality out of school? As Christina said, to connect schools or to address in schools social issues that are very important at this moment out of schools, or to also connect schools with families that I think in the Nordic countries is not as here, but in Spain are quite disconnected. Would you have some ideas, some proposals, some initiatives to connect these two worlds that look very separate but actually are the same world?
Well, this situation has, I mean, children have not been in classrooms now. They've not been in school. So for me, this is sort of a change. We always talk about change and transformation and things around that. But I think what we experience now might be a fundamental shift in these things. So I don't think families or there are solutions from this that children should stay at home. There are some arguing that in our country, that homeschooling will now be much more important and so forth. I don't think so. I think school is still very important as a social mechanism, as an institution in our society, for bringing children together with a teacher and sort of providing environments for growth and development. But we have to rethink what we mean by that. So and I know Christina, we've been discussing this also, that what kind of models do we see for education and learning in the 21st century, and sort of in a future perspective? Do we still think along the same lines that we've done for now 100 years around an institution of mass education, providing classes and grades and subjects and so forth? Or should we enter some other kind of models that we should explore? And this connectedness between different spaces and environments that young people move between is one aspect of how this learning is becoming more networked. So they are in an environment of networking where they deal with different kinds of challenges, questions, in different kinds of environments, and technology is an embedded part of that. So the big change right now is that technology is sort of embedded. We're not talking about technology as a thing out there. It's in our lives. It's where we communicate, where we have teaching and so forth. So these models around what networked learning might be and connectedness and how different spaces represent different possibilities, but also challenges for children and youth concerning learning. I think it's very important, but it brings also back the question of what kind of school, what is school in our society? I think school is important, but it's not, maybe not the same kind of school that we've been looking at for some years.
Yeah, I very strongly echo what Ola is saying, and I'm like thinking that perhaps the general discussion around education now has been very technologically technocentric, and I would like to move the conversation to think about more like not even human-centric, but more like relation-centric. So how we can create education that is connected to different life worlds of the learners and the society, and also how humans can connect with each other, and what are the best ways to support such types of interactions and relations, and even with the more than human world like nature and the environment. So I think now, after we are recovered slightly to think more, we should move our discourse from thinking about the technology being the core issue or humans, but more like relations and what kind of interactions, patterns, connections interactions we are able to create, and how technology is one part that creates these possibilities for connecting and relating. So, but we are more focused now, we should be on these relations and how to support them with different means, not forgetting other means. I think technologies have always assisted us. Even language is kind of a technology that connects us. Now we have these external tools, digital tools that can support us, but we need to also move beyond not only thinking about the technology, but also more to do with these relations and interactions and connections that we can create, and what's their purpose, and how education can be delivered in these types, in these kind of visions of society being connected and related. So these are kind of my perhaps slightly more philosophical thoughts to move the discourse from techno and human-centric to relation-centric or connected-centric discourse.
Just a small, sorry, Ola. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just mentioning that, or thinking around communities, because for us, community is an entity of our education system that's been important for many years, because we're a society consisting of many small communities. So Norway we have 5 million inhabitants scattered in remote areas. So our national curriculum has been built on sort of giving outlines and guidelines, but also giving a lot of freedom and responsibility for teachers on a local level to deal with issues in the local community. So we have a long tradition of schools working with community centers or other agencies in the local communities. And this has moved now more into digital communities and others. So we are also discussing now what is a community and how do we develop that further in our understanding of educational provision for all students. So in our research, we've also been focusing on connecting sort of school and out of school, but also the role of communities.
Yeah, that's very important. And actually, what Ola brings about, also what we have had discussions in Finland and internationally, is that actually the quality of all materials targeted for learning and education is not that great. So harnessing knowledge, even learning materials that has been created by different communities, like cultural institutions, libraries, and also education. We need to start to explore. There are wonderful materials and ideas already available that has been perhaps developed in a community that has not been linked so strongly in kind of formal schooling. So how bring these different communities even more strongly into interaction and harnessing the outcomes of their work, and also help the next generation to learn with these activities, models, learning environments, and contents. I think there is still much to do. So one of the challenges has been in Finland that perhaps not all materials have been very good, of highly educational value. We know this from research, that there are still gaps and a lot is now required from the teachers themselves to create these activities and learning materials. Although that is still valued in Finland, teachers love to engage in designing learning materials. That's also expected, and that's a driving force why teachers are happy to be teachers in Finland, because they have this passion for design and creativity, but still they need also some ideas, inspirations, and also materials that they can use in their teaching. And now bringing these different communities and their expertise and their learnings and contents become available for everybody really is going to have reciprocal value to all actors, I believe.
I just wanted to comment before that it's so impressive, because we had another talk with teachers from secondary school. They were very enthusiastic teachers and very special, innovative teachers. But I was impressed because many of the proposals you're making, they were making the same. So I was impressed how teachers and researchers are connected. That many times is the critique that, oh, the universities, and researchers are going this way and teachers are going this other way. So I was surprised about this, and actually I was thinking, why, if many teachers, many researchers, we all agree in this changes, in this not just small changes but transformation of the system, why it's so complicated? But let me just ask another thing after what you've been talking about communities, which is, do you think that adding these materials and projects, ideas from communities that are more oppressed at this moment could also help the educational system to be more inclusive and to gain more equity? Because we could maybe add perspectives from communities that are actually not that present in schools and in the curricula.
Yeah,
yes,
I believe strongly. So, I mean, some of the research we've done and all this research on funds of knowledge kind of thing is how you respect different resources for learning, and giving space and opening up spaces where students with different backgrounds can bring different aspects of themselves, their resources, but also see their learning as meaningful or authentic in a way, through connecting to what they do at home or resources they have from other kind of contexts and so forth. So we have this, I don't think we have it as much in our country that in the US, for example, or some other countries where you sort of, the teacher is just following a certain norm or provision of education and knowledge, and the assessment system is very strict. And we have much more open kind of environments, which gives different students with different backgrounds possibilities. But of course, it's still a challenge for many teachers who have to provide with these different voices in the classroom, with different resources and impressions, experiences they bring in, to validate all of them in a certain way in what's going on within the classroom.
Yes, I totally agree, and I would ideally, I would hope that this type of collaboration across different formal, non-formal and informal communities will create more possibilities to access knowledge and to construct knowledge. I strongly believe that that would be the case, because these communities usually serve different cultures and individuals who come to education and who live these lives differently. So having this richness in the ways we can engage in building our knowledge is so important, and also connecting it with our own backgrounds and values is very important. And I hope that this kind of a collaboration will also improve kind of education and create equity and be kind of promote social justice globally even. One thing that, however, I am also worried is that we are now, and I am proposing, for example, a lot of ideas what we should now research and collaborate. So I'm at the same time worried how long everything now lasts with the restrictions, and are we able to now do any research? And what kind of means and methods do we researchers now have to engage in with our teacher partners or schools at different levels? So what kind of restrictions and possibilities, and how we can combat them in terms of engaging in educational research and development in these changed times, is something that I am now currently personally also thinking what alternative ways there is to do research and development work.
Yeah, I think it also opened up interesting questions about what kind of research we should focus on for the coming year or years, both methodologically, how do we see new possibilities for data collection and ways of analyzing, but also research questions themselves. What becomes the core research questions that we as educational researchers should address?
Yeah.
And we have a tendency in Norway also that we build more relationships with stakeholders and users as part of our research. Earlier on, we were more focusing on our research agendas per se, but now as part of research proposals, we're building relationships with teachers and parents and others.
Yeah.
I think for sure that in your future research, you will want to include all this experience about COVID, right? It's an obvious thing, but what do you think, or how do you think that teachers or schools, and also you in universities, how can we include these experiences by the side of youth? How do you think that teachers could include all the things that they were living? You know, we are all adults. We are not 13, 14, or 15 years old, and I think that it might be a terrible situation to be locked down without your friends. So how do you think, if you had one or two advices to teachers that are listening to us in this Charlas COVID, of how to incorporate these experiences? And Ola, you told us previously that perhaps they lost some curriculum things to learn, but maybe they have another type of learnings. How to include them in our return to schools?
Now, I think one important issue is about social ways of learning, that this has really triggered awareness about the dimensions of learning that were lost as part of this. So it became things that we take for granted, sort of in a school environment, or sort of with a focus on what kind of knowledge the students should gain as within different subjects. So the social aspects of learning, ways of students collaborating, teachers' role in relating to different groups of students, I think that's an important aspect. I also think that we should learn something from the digital dimension as part of this. So both in risks and opportunities that the digital provides. So my focus is not maybe to easily go back to what we used to do and think about technology again as a thing, like Christina emphasized, but more relational aspects of how we deal with learning. So, and that opens up some of these issues also of connecting to other spaces where learning takes place. So it's not said that learning only takes place in the classroom. But what do we mean by that? So the family at home, now we try that through homeschooling and so forth. And I know many companies in Norway are discussing now homework as a more standard kind of ways of working. So instead of bringing all workers back to the company or something, they think of hybrid solutions. So they come up with new models, and we should do the same for education.
I totally agree what Ola is saying, and feel that I think during these 3-4 months we have learned, and I think also teachers, how much learning happens everywhere, that we can learn in so many different places, and we need to harness and knowledge those learnings and build on those learnings, or then help to extend those learnings in and through our education efforts. So this is one thing that we must all recognize, how learning happens everywhere. I noticed here in Vancouver and in British Columbia how also education was put online for young children and older children and universities, and how they have also harnessed here a lot of project work where students can build on their own knowledge bases and communities and cultural knowledge. So not all students, although they are all aiming for same educational goals, they are linking their own cultural backgrounds and communities that they live into their learning activities and projects, and sharing then these beautiful photos, videos, experiences, expressing themselves in multimodal ways, how they experienced a project, like my favorite art, or my favorite place, and then writing about the history and photographing themselves in that place, and telling much more about their hopes for that place in the future. So having then a collection of these kind of personalized project works and discussing them online with the teachers has been something really empowering, and how exciting it has been. I think I have seen this also in our sons' activities and interactions, how exciting it has been to learn from other students and who they are and what they have learned, and sharing these experiences through technology, even in these types of COVID, has been something very unique. So I think also teachers need to acknowledge these possibilities more widely, because they are really empowering for learning, for your identity, and for engagement. This is only a short and a narrow example, but I think there are many possibilities that we can learn from, and definitely should harness these learnings even when we return back to our some sort of more normal lives.
And one aspect I mean, some of the research going on now as part of COVID-19, and myself also talking to teachers, is why they became teachers are often linked to the social dimensions of learning. To see a child grow, to find that moment where something happens in the learning trajectory is sort of the moment. It's not to become a teacher to just deliver content as such. It's to create these spaces, but they're often forced into certain kind of roles by government and so forth. But I think this reminds us of that kind of dimensions of learning, of what I call life skills also, and social dimensions of learning. So it becomes more present. What will happen, nobody knows. But I think this will define our discussions about educational futures.
Yeah.
So I know that it's time to finish, but I have a several question more. So I would like to ask, in my case, my last question is a big question. Always the last question is a very big question.
Another 1 hour.
But it's a question that the rest of the world have, you know, the people that is not Nordic, you know. So because, you know, we have the reflex or the imagine from Nordic to each of our ideas on our action and our educational system. So, but do you know, with this new environment from the COVID-19, what kind of initiative from the Nordics country, what kind of policies include on action can be exported to the rest of the world, for example, considering the enormous difference of the development models, social inclusion, etc. I know that you are from Norway and you from Finland, but you have a very good knowledge of the rest of other countries, for example, not only developed countries. So and also, no each action is expensive. You know, some action is only some policies need only creativity, and you know. So I don't know, what is kind of advisor do you think that could be you sent to the other country in this kind of situation, especially other educational system, from your perspective, of course?
Well, I would be very careful of telling what others should do or what kind of things should be.
So it's not my intention, it's only a perception.
No,
I know.
I understand. So one aspect I would say is around teacher education and the role of teachers in the classroom. So the teacher professionalism is very strong, especially in Finland, but it's become very strong in our country during the last 5 to 10 years also. There is a strong emphasis on teacher education, but also new ways of understanding teachers as designers, as Christina mentioned. And so they are sort of productive contributors with students around learning environments and what kind of knowledge is produced and so forth. The other element is, as we talked about earlier, is around community. So when I've been traveling around the world in Africa and the countries, I'm struck why classroom looks like a classroom. If I'm in Tanzania and enter a sort of poor community, there is a blackboard, there is a teacher's desk, there are rows of students where they sit either on rows or at their desk. And I always ask why this model comes out the way it does. So in some of these countries, I've been in discussions around community and community learning and the role of schools or certain kind of environments within communities that could provide specific learning trajectories for students, and breaking off sort of that kind of conception of school as a building, as a classroom containing 30 students and so forth. And I think from the Nordic countries, we have an experience, and we have sort of teachers and communities that are focused on these things, and that gives them possibilities. They give them trust in themselves and in the education system, but also it provides possibilities for students. That said, we have also challenges within our systems of immigration, of inequalities in socioeconomic backgrounds of students, which is a very strong force in succeeding in the education system. But still, there are possibilities within our system.
Yes, I also agree. Teacher education and teacher continuous learning possibilities, professional development is something that Finland has invested greatly. So being and learning to become a teacher is a lifelong and life-wide process. So I would like to emphasize that not only one degree is enough, but we need to support teachers and value their work, and also support their opportunities to all the time develop in their work in positive ways is something that I would like to emphasize, and I hope other countries in the world will learn from that. I think emphasis on equality in education, making sure that everybody has the right to quality education is something that I would like to see happening throughout the world in policy and in practice. I think this is such a big thing. And also, I think today's world with different types of movements, Black Lives Matter and climate change, it is asking new ways of also supporting the next generation to become attentive. And critical literacy is something that I would like to promote, and how to support young people taking action, not necessarily in very radical ways, but different ways in which they can be part in society and have their voice being part of growing into this society is something I would hope education policies in different parts of the world would address. But on the whole, I would say that we need to learn from one another, and there is no one trick that can be just carried to another country. We need collective imagining about just futures, and we need to support the young generation also building skills how to participate in this type of democratic social imagining of our futures. So in addition to disciplinary knowledge, I think these skills and competencies that are to do with collaboration, kind of empathy and compassion and social skills are very important, and every educational policy and curricula should find a space and ways how these can be promoted. and that we can generate next generation who is agentive and relational in their kind of activities. These are some very important passions that I believe are very much at the core of our futures on the globe. So thank you.
I think this is the last question because we're running out of
last
time.
question.
It's really, really comfortable.
10 last question.
That is really the last question, and it can be really, really short. But actually, you started talking about the political part of all this, and we're planning to have, let's see how it goes, some talks with educational actors involved in politics, and already we know that they want to connect more the educational policies with research, with academia, with schools, with family needs. And I know that the Nordic countries are quite open to that, and that actually the last curriculum you're building or you already built is also based on these relationships. Could you give us some short advice to close, to try to connect more educational policies, academia, and schools in Spain?
Well, I would like to say that the key issue here is that when you make these policies, invite everybody to participate. So policies should not be only made by politicians, but you need to invite all these actors that you listed, teachers, researchers, actors in different parts of the society to discuss and make these policies. Collaboration, intersectoral collaboration is one possibility that may be the answer for creating policies that are really then acted in practice.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, we have, when we have a new national curriculum, for example, we always have what is called a committee that develops a green paper that is presented in the parliament and before any decision or policy is developed. And that consists of researchers, of teachers, and stakeholders coming together and working for a year and 1.5 years, bringing a field together and discussing some core issues at what's at stake for the next 10 years within our education system. And policymakers are not involved in that committees, but they are sort of the sort of the delivery of these green papers are for the parliament and the policymakers. But we also have meetings when educational policies are made besides that, where teachers, researchers, and policymakers are sit down together and discuss. So we have a tradition of these things in our system.
Great. Well, I have a last question. No, it was. I want to say
we can go on.
Thank you very much for sharing this time with us. It was really, really lovely, and we were making a lot of notes. We learned a lot. So just to thank you, Cristina and Ola. It was a great time for us. So let's hope that you enjoy it as we do.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also.
Good questions.
Thank you both.
Thank you.